Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. MC Mura here, and in today's video I'm gonna be talking about the one change that I would like to see the most in the upcoming balance patch for Street Fighter V. If you're not aware, the next season I think should be the final one for the game. Obviously we got all of the content like in terms of characters and costumes and all of that, but there should be like one final balance patch in March. And I think overall the game is in a pretty decent state. Balancing wise, I have already made a video, like a tier list video, so you can check this out. I will leave a link to that in the card above. But I do think there is one thing in Street Fighter V that is horribly unbalanced at the moment. It's gonna be controversial because depending on who you play, you might either love it or you might really hate it, and that is V-Shift. I think V-Shift is a mechanic that when we first started looking at it, it seemed to be a very powerful defensive option, right? It was frame 1, fully invincible. If you happen to like V-Shift an attack, you get half of your bar back. Depending on the recovery of that attack, you can punish it on a successful V-Shift, or maybe go for a V-Shift break, or maybe even just V-Shift and get back some distance, create some separation. So that was really good options. And obviously you could also avoid throws with it. It is decent against command grabs, although against regular grabs you will be at negative frames. And when the patch first launched, you had to keep the directions at neutral to be able to do V-Shift. Later Capcom adjusted the mechanic and made it so that you can hold back or forward, not down back, and still be able to V-Shift, which I do think was a huge buff to this mechanic. When we first got it, I feel like the overall consensus in the community was that it was kinda underwhelming, because we expected it to be like a parry mechanic, right, where you can parry everything or like V-Shift everything, and now you get a punish. While in actuality you were able to do that versus very specific options, right? And obviously as we have developed it a little bit, we found out that for many characters there is a throw OS, where for example you can go for a throw if the opponent happen to V-Shift. Typically the aggressor will be at plus frames, so maybe they will be able to get a punish on them. And I think when people judge V-Shift, for the most part they approach it as a wake-up option and not a defensive option. And I feel like it's important to highlight the difference. And a wake-up option is when you do the move on wake-up, and that's when the throw OS is at its most powerful. Now my biggest issue with V-Shift is that the different characters' ability to punish it on wake-up is dramatically unbalanced, right? Some characters legitimately have no options, or like they have to have very specific tools. There are characters like Birdie, like Armika, who don't really get a punish on V-Shift, right? Birdie can't really get it from a bullhorn knockdown, which is his primary knockdown, especially on a back rise. Or after a brimstone, Mika can't really chase it unless she uses EX speech. So these are some issues, right? Now the thing is, the characters who happen to be already really good actually ended up being the ones that can get a really good punish on it, which is kind of funny all things considered, right? So for example, a character like Poison, I can go for a throw. If it happens to whiff, I get a standing heavy kick, and guess what? I get a crush counter, get to combo into my V skill, and build almost an entire V gauge. So the rich got richer, right? I feel like that's one of the biggest issue. Now if you even disregard using the mechanic itself on wake up and the disparity between characters being able to punish it, you have to think of how powerful this is as a mechanic on defense, right? Let's say for example that the opponent is going and doing a block string, right? Like they're doing a crouching medium punch, standing medium punch, right? Regardless of what that string is, you can always V-Shift unless it's a true block swing where you can't get an input out, right? And typically with frame traps you should be able to get an input out. You can always V-Shift, and if you're mid-screen, that's a free escape. Now for some characters this might be fine, but for others, for example characters like Laura, characters like G, being able to V-Shift out of their block sequences every time, that is just a pain in the ass. Now you can, most of the characters, or at least a good portion of them, can punish it with using the throw OS on a knockdown, that is if they are point blank. But if say you did a normal and then the opponent decided to V-shift the second hit of your block string, I think the vast majority of the characters will not be able to punish that V-shift. So this is a big problem. Now another thing that you have to consider is that the throw OS is only effective against V-shift, but if the opponent happen to backdash, you can't really throw OS, right? Because the backdash have much less recovery than V-shift, so the opponent pretty much gets to escape. So backdashing on wake up or V-shifting with wake up is pretty much now a 50-50, and the main issue with this is that the characters who already had amazing defense, think of characters like Cammy, Rashid and Karen, who have like the 3 frames, who have good backdashes, invincible reversals, now they have V-shift as well, right? And obviously there are other class of characters who I do think are just way too good in the neutral, right? You have to think of characters like Dulcim, like Poison, like Ninat, like Falk. They have never been this dominant or as dominant as they are in the current meta, simply because of V-shift, right? Because their neutral is already way too good. Honestly, if you play Dulcim, Poison, Ninat, Falk, whatever, either V-shift on wake up, block one attack and then V-shift and you're out. You genuinely are out at this point, right? And the opponent can't really chase you or do much, and you're already way better than most of the cast in the neutral. So I feel like there's something that needs to be done about V-shift, because it ended up helping the rich, right? And the poor characters who already were struggling are struggling even harder, and that is creating some sort of imbalance. Now if it was up to me, I would adjust V-shift in 2 main ways. The first one is make it so that when you happen to V-shift an attack, you don't get the bar back. Now if you happen to V-shift an attack, you get half of your bar back, regardless if you did the V-shift break or not. And I think maybe keep keep the part of like gaining back V-gauge only on the V-break, but not on the V-shift, because if you happen to V-shift something and you get a punish, getting the V-gauge back is way too much of an overkill in my opinion, right? So that will make the V-break kind of a little bit more useful, right? And make it only on hit, so that if your opponent happen to block the V-break, you actually don't get back anything. And I would actually make the V-break punishable on block. I make it heavily punishable on block, something like -10 or something, that the opponent actually get a big punish on that. And the other thing I would change is add more recovery on whiff, right? I will add at least 10 or 15 more recovery on a whiffed V-shift, on whiff only, right? So that it doesn't affect which attacks you happen to be able to punish if you V-shift, but if you happen to use your V-shift and you happen to whiff it, I want every character in the game to be able to get a substantial punish on that, right? Maybe even make it so that you don't regain any V-gauge at all, because I do feel like the mechanic is very powerful as it is, and I would like to see it being toned down, in all honesty. I think obviously this depends a lot on who you play, like I said previously, but I feel like at the moment you will see that there is a good sentiment among the players that is just too good as it is. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think V-shift is too good? Do you think V-shift is just fine? Who do you play regardless of your thoughts? Because I do think the character you play will have significant, impact on your, let's say on your thoughts on V-shift, right? I mean, let's keep it clean, right? Because if you play a character like Karen or Cammy, you'll probably love it and think it's the best thing ever. I will be leaving a link to the Twitter page, Twitch page, Discord and the Patreon page in the description below. Thank you very much for watching and stay safe.